Hi, everybody. Well, in the Zoom world, you usually don't have to give your name anymore, but my name is Kurt Guyar. It's there at the bottom of the screen. I'm the managing director for the Center of the American West, and I want to welcome all of you to the very first inaugural event in what we hope will be a long-running series called CU Student Veteran, Memories of Services and Visions for the Future, CU Student Veterans as Key Figures in Sustaining the Mission of Higher Education. This week we featured Nisa Jovel and Reed Robins are joining us. Next week we have the very same event, however, at the noon hour, and we will be joined by Bob John and Zach Giuliano. So please register for that. You can go to our website and find links for that. Do want to let you know about a couple other events that we're doing as well. We started a speaker series or an interview series called Historians Imagine, and it features conversations with path-breaking historians about inventiveness and vision and the role of creativity in their work. So our next one is actually coming up quite soon, March 10th, with B. Aaron Cole, who's a cartoonist and public historian from the Minnesota Historical Society. And then we have an April 15th one with Jenny Price, May 12th with Phil Deloria, and June 9th with Natalie Molina. In addition, we have an event on Friday, March 12th with the faculty director for the Center for Humanities and Arts, Jennifer Ho. It's the second part of a two-part series that we've had. It's more conversation about how to disagree. This is called More Conversation and Maybe More Disagreement with Patty Limerick and Jennifer Ho. So if you're looking for some little conflict and action, you may be able to find it there, but not too much. And then we have a great breaking news announcement is that you can't even quite register for it yet, but a Partisanship and Friendship Happens series that will feature the president of CU University, Mark Kennedy, and the president from University of Massachusetts at Amherst, Marty Meehan. They both served in Congress together on opposite sides of the aisle, formed a friendship. And so this is a series to talk about that friendship, but I believe we'll hear about higher education and their respective roles there as well. And so go to our website. You can find information on all those events and lots of other things, including Patty's weekly blog, Not My First Rodeo. But without further ado, I'll introduce Patty Limerick, the faculty director for the Center of the American West.
Thank you, Kurt, and thank you, attendees, and thank you, presenters. This is something I have been looking forward to for more years than I knew could even be looked forward to. I am very privileged to be an academic associate and friend of the Veteran and Military Affairs Office on campus and to speak at the Summer Bridge. And I cannot accent enough that subtitle of our program today, CU Student Veterans as Key Figures in Sustaining the Mission of Higher Education. They certainly, ending up in their company, having the chance to talk to them, hearing their stories, has certainly sustained my mission in higher education, which is maybe not the world's priority to keep me feeling motivated, but it surely has been that. So I am going to start in, not with introductions, because I really want to make sure we get the participants' voices heard and their great temperaments and personalities on not in display, that's not quite the right term, but where you can hear them and learn from them. So I'm going to ask our two presenters. We have Nisa Jovel and we have Reed Robins. And rather than my telling you in what branch they served and what their majors are and so on, I'm going to just have them present themselves, because that way you get to see who they are a lot faster. So Nisa, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you, Patty. So as Patty said, my name is Nisa Jovel. My major at CU is Integrative Physiology and Anthropology. I was a Marine veteran, so I served in the Marine Corps for about 4 years. And I'm also the campus community coordinator at the VMA at CU Boulder.
Great, thank you. And Reed.
Hi, I'm Reed Robins. I was in the Navy for 6 years as a nuclear electrician. So basically the electric side of a nuclear plant. And then now I'm studying economics with an emphasis in public policy at CU Boulder.
Great. Okay, so we thought we would just plunge right in. And I live for stories, and as far as I can tell, many military veterans have many stories that they tell to each other a good share of the time, but that they will share with us, with all of us, whether we are veterans or not today. So we're going to start with a pretty intense, let's go into it question here that actually one of our participants wrote. So here we go. What part of your time spent in the military was most memorable and shaped you as the person you are today? And maybe we'll reverse order this time. Reach, we start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So the first one that comes to mind, one time I was in switchgear, which is where we worked, and I get a call from my master chief, and I go up to the office, and he tells me we have a level of knowledge with the commanding officer. So we go up to the bridge, and I didn't think much of it, just another thing to do, and we briefly discussed nuclear power, which was the point of the journey. But what he ended up doing was basically showing us how the entire ship worked from his perspective. And so it was a really interesting opportunity to, number one, see a good leader in action, and then number two, just get a different view, because I used to work in the bowels of the ship, so that's all I see is just those steel walls all day. And then so we're watching planes launch off, and he's explaining all of the things they're considering, and it gave me an entirely new perspective on like what the Navy does. Like, I understood before, obviously, the general purpose, but the scale of the coordination and what was involved with that. So it kind of motivated me to look towards, to basically broaden my horizons. And it's just something that really stands out. I know it's not really funny, but I will never forget that moment.
Yeah, I would think. And I think that we'll be returning when we make the transition from the military service to the higher education thing about your reflections on seeing the whole and thinking what leaders can be to coordinate such a complicated entity. Universities have a certain resemblance to a Navy ship in terms of complexity and what are all these pieces and parts doing. So we might want to return to that. It's a great angle. So Nisa.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I forgot to mention earlier. So in the Marine Corps, I served 4 years as an Aviation Operations Specialist, and I worked on a rotary wing platform. And for those of you that don't know, that just means helicopters. So Hueys, Cobras, and Zulus. However, prior to that, there was an experiment that was actually going on in the Marine Corps. It was around 2013. And what happened is the Marine Corps were deciding to allow female Marines to integrate into what is called the Infantry Training Battalion, or ITB. So you were not necessarily given the choice to go, but if you showed a certain amount of, physical fitness, leadership while you were in boot camp, then you had the choice if you wanted to do that training versus what is called Marine combat training. So I chose to do it. I just wanted to challenge myself. And it's a little bit longer than Marine combat training. And pretty much what it's geared towards is infantry training is only for infantry Marines. And at that time, no women had ever done this, had completed this task. So I think I arrived in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina around 2013 of February, I believe it was around the time frame. And what happened is I was put into a platoon, myself and 27 other females with about roughly 200 or more males. We were tested, we were trained with the men, we did everything exactly at male standards in the Marine Corps. And of course, there was a very high failure rate for that. However, around April 11th, 2014, I'm mistaken. At that time, I had graduated, and it was just 7 of us left, 7 females in total that were just completely left. So from there, and after making that journey, myself and possibly only about 120 other females in the world had ever completed the training. And from there, it definitely shaped my mentality of just taking myself, not taking things for granted, but also taking the decisions that I make more seriously and understanding that leadership from both perspectives. So that was my story.
That is really beyond my comprehension of what it would be to take that on. And I'm just going to ask you a question that probably comes more from my thinking about how I would think, but did you think you were going to make it when you started in that?
It was a little nerve-wracking because I saw so many, when you go to like a new station, whether it's like for training or some sort of like school, there's like holding platoons where like you stay at one place before you're picked up from your actual group. So while I was there, I saw a lot of women failing and failing and failing, or they were injured, or they had to go home. So it started to get to my head for a minute. I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can really do this. But I just told myself, you know what, as long as I wake up every day and just maybe not necessarily think about what hasn't been done and thinking about what I can do each day to just push through it no matter what. So I eventually just, I built that, I really built a strong camaraderie with a lot of the guys that I was with. And it was just, they really helped me through it a lot, along with the other females that were there with me.
Right. Okay. I want to return to the fact that you were with good collaborators. I want to come back to that whole getting to know who you're with and relying on each other. But Reed, I want to go back to you for a moment and just ask to bridge to actually one of the second questions that you said written, which she's also done a bridge to. Could you tell us about a time when you were, as she was here, really challenged to your core? And you might even have had a moment or two of thinking, I think I'm going to get through, but we'll have to wait and see. So how about
Yes, absolutely. So the time that stands out for me is we were in shipyard, which is a terrible experience if you're in the Navy. And we were on 3-section duty. My wife was on 3-section duty on her ship, but we were alternate, so we basically never saw each other. And we were undergoing a reinstall of a good portion of the electrical system, and I was one of the project managers on that. And we were working probably 100-hour weeks and just slogging through for months at a time. And it was like 30 degrees in our berthing and Fahrenheit, and I'd go, we'd be on watch for 8 hours a day and then working all day. And so there was a period where I just was very concerned that I wasn't able to make it, but made it through and on the other side, and we completed all we needed to.
You said 100 hours a week.
Yes. Yeah. So,
Wow.
We basically lived on the ship, and I got one day off. It was pretty rough.
That's so. And the term shipyard. Tell me that. What is that?
Shipyard. So when we do maintenance or large maintenance items on the ship, so we'll pull into a dock in Norfolk. It's actually in Portsmouth, but they basically pull the ship in, and it has all of the facilities for complex maintenance, where they'll reinstall generators or do any major upgrades to anything throughout the ship. So it's a weird period because you're working with shipyard contractors, so they have to do a lot of the work, but you have to help them do a lot of the work, but you also have all of the things you have to take care of. So you're in this environment where you have two bureaucratic organizations working together to accomplish all these goals. It's just a very complicated, rough experience.
Right. I actually, for some reason, I guess having seen agencies try to collaborate, I actually think that the notion of interagency cooperation should be the subject of Stephen King horror novels, because things could really, people are just, we're going to have this task together, and then, good heavens, the things that can happen in interagency cooperation. So with the private contractors, I guess, so, oh boy. So, alrighty, so I want to go back to what took you down this path. And I would like you to tell me about, well, really, with some brevity, I guess, your lives before you decided to enlist and how that decision came to you. And then I'll come back to this a little bit, but did the people, your family and your friends, did they think, yeah, we saw that coming? Were they surprised? Were they, well, I'd like to know how the not the bystanders, but the people closest to you and your friends just were thinking, what's happened there? So could you tell us about the decision, what you did that prepared you for that or headed you in that direction before enlisting, and what was the moment of decision, and then how people looked at you and thought, yes, we saw that, or what on earth has happened to him or her? So maybe, should we just reverse this time and Reed, you start this one, and then we'll go back to Denise.
Yeah, so before the Navy, I followed a very typical path. I, graduated high school, went to college, but I didn't really have a larger vision. I just knew go to college. It's a good thing to do. And I wasn't doing very well. I wasn't happy. I didn't see a good path forward. I actually saw one of the people I worked with had the degree I was going for. And that was the moment when I realized like what you're doing is what my path is. And that is not what I want to do. So I realized I need to do something else. And my grandma, basically, she knew of someone who was in the Navy, and they had just had a conversation, and she said, the Navy always needs nukes. I was like, well, what's that? Let's find out. And so that started me down that path. I looked into it a little bit, and then after learning about it, I decided to that would be the best option. I needed to just get out and try something new. My friends were quite surprised. I was like a nerdy, slightly chubby kid who didn't do a lot of, so they're like, what are you doing? But worked out. So
that is totally interesting. And would you say that the period of not knowing what you were doing was worth the time and trouble, that you ended up knowing what you were doing more emphatically and effectively because you had spent the time not knowing?
So in hindsight, I wish I had just joined out of high school,
Right.
because I think having that period between college where I could figure out what I actually was interested in and what sort of path I wanted to take, I had done that earlier. I wish I had done that earlier, but I'm still happy with the way things worked out.
Okay. Right. So, Nisa, this is going to be a interesting interlude of sports, if I have this right, that we are going
Yeah, of course. So for me, I actually knew I wanted to join when I was about 13 years old. And, a lot of it dealt with just, my home life and really not wanting to necessarily live the lives of those that I saw around me all the time. I knew I wanted a lot better for myself. Although, I mean, of course, like anyone, I mean, I'm very grateful for what my family and my parents have done for me and how they have given me the tools that allowed me to get this far. However, when I decided I wanted to join at 13, actually what happened was I went to the recruiting station, and most recruiting stations, they have what's called their PT, so it's like their physical training that they do weekly. And I went to one of them, and for whatever reason, like getting the crap beat out of me while doing these hard runs or lifting weights or whatever it was, any sort of like military type training or high intensity, I fell in love with it immediately. And I just wanted to keep going and keep pushing and more and more and more. And I really couldn't get enough of it. And from 13 all the way to about 17 to 18 years old, when I went to boot camp, I had been training at my recruiting station for those 4 years. So boot camp was, it was not exactly that tough in terms of the physical aspect of it, because I had prepared myself so long. But that's really what propelled me in that direction. And it changed my mentality. It changed my way of thinking, the people I surrounded myself with in high school. It changed how I, adapted and overcame a lot of situations, being from only a 13-year-old to 17, 18 years old. So.
Wow. And so I guess that nobody was going to be surprised, since you had had this ambition for 4 years. But the people around you, did they think, oh, she's going to change your mind about that? Or were they surprised when you stuck with this?
Well, not necessarily surprised, just because I was always like a very physically active, athlete. So for me, like the physical aspect wasn't a surprise. And but in some cases, there's always the doubts. There was always people who were like, you might, maybe you'll let it go after you graduate. You'll probably just go to college. But I just stuck on it. Like I just continuously just kept living that lifestyle of just everything. I mean, I adapted to the point I would just wake up early, make my bed, go work out, and I was just in such a routine for years and years and years. And it became so easy to me and so natural to me that I was like, I could really do this. Like, this is really what I want to do with my life.
So I'm not asking about the stereotypes, but I somehow I can't suppress the question. Did you get up and shine your shoes? And that could be some stereotype of the military that I am trotting out here, and I apologize for that. So you made your bed, but you may or may not have shined your shoes, and I don't really need to know. So moving on, I would like to shift now to the well, first I have a quick question, Nisa. Is there any sport you don't enjoy, Nisa?
Well, and maybe some individuals might think that I'm wrong about this, but like golf, I mean, for me, I'm very competitive, so it has to be contact. It has to be more physical. So I was in a lot of sports that were rugby, gymnastics, soccer, football, martial arts, like very more combative, more physical sports that really can challenge me. So
Yeah.
sorry for anyone who likes golf, but no, I can't do it.
I'm glad I asked. That was for that. So, okay, so now the thing I want to go to is, well, I want to do expectations. So the transition once you were in, just if both of you, we'll start with you, Nisa, but what was just like, oh, this is exactly what I expected? What dimensions were that? What were dimensions of, oh, this is not what I expected, and I'm not entirely sure that's what I wanted, or this wasn't what I expected, and this is better. This is better than I expected. So just do sort of a catalog of the what came out as you expected, what came out as you didn't expect, but actually might have enjoyed even more, or thought, oh, this wasn't really what I was bargaining for. So, okay, go.
So, Patty, actually, everything was not what I expected. Actually, I realized that when I got out of the military, I really had to humble myself and understand that this is a completely different world that I'm going to have to adapt to in a different means. Because, truthfully, not everyone really cares that I was a veteran and that Reed was a veteran. Like, they don't necessarily always like, oh my gosh, you were in the military, like you're so special. And it's like, no, they don't really look at you that way, whether you're applying for a job or any of those things. So pretty much nothing was what I expected. I luckily have always been very independent and just learned how to do things on my own. So I at least had that playing for me, and just being very goal driven. I knew I wanted to go to school. School was definitely on the list. So I knew for a fact that college is definitely where I'm going to go. But my first year getting out, actually, I decided to join the women's rugby team at CU. And for my third or fourth match, I collided with another player and I tore my entire knee apart, like ACL, MCL, meniscus, patella, all that. And so that was my first year getting out. And that from there moving forward, I mean, everything humbled me completely, whether it's being around younger students, understanding that they have a lot more, they have a lot more knowledge base around this world that I had to adapt to, and just really humbling myself mentally and physically. So yeah, nothing was what I expected.
Well, that is pretty interesting. So the transition into the military was sort of more, well, this is what I was ready for. And then the transition out was the world is really going somewhere without a full operator's guide for me just yet. Cool, interesting, really interesting. So Reed, how about the two transitions of what you expected going into the military and what you expected going out, and which was the wilder transition?
So my expectations going in were, pretty stereotypical boot camp, and then go, I just assumed I'd be in training, and then I had no idea what a ship would be like. So I just really didn't know. Training was way more brutal than I expected. It's not physical, like Nisa's was. It was academic. Here's a pile of nuclear material. Get it into your head, and you can't leave until you do. So it was war of attrition with the books there. So I did not expect that. But getting out was, I would say, the more of a shock, because I knew I would be expecting a large change, and I was on the way out. I thought, oh, it's back to civilian world. I've done this before. But the dramatic change in pace, from constant action, constant having a huge list of things that need to happen, on a very rigorous schedule, to now you're in school, and again, it's a bunch of things you need to learn, but it's all on your own pace, on your own time, and you're dealing with these 18-year-olds who, when I joined, I was around their maturity level, and now it feels very different. So just re-entering that society has been strange.
Huh.
I also just real quick, when I left, I immediately went to Berkeley, California, because that was my original goal. And that was an extra culture shock, because the military is not exclusively, the stereotypical like conservative white person, but there's a lot of that, and the shift to Berkeley was very interesting.
You know, I'm just thinking that this subtitle of our program here of student veterans is the key figures in sustaining the mission of higher education, that there's something that is really a great opportunity for higher education, should student veterans choose to be part of that, that when you are brought into a university, or when you enter by your own choice a university, you are like really great observers that we should be tapping. And you need to know that I started college in 1968, and I have been in universities ever since then. So I have fallen into the habit of taking a lot of things for granted, of just saying, well, this is the ambiance, this is the water I swim in, I'm a fish, this is the water. So there's just something extremely interesting about what we could gain from really taking smart people coming into our world who are thinking, what are all these people doing? Do you choose at this moment, or maybe a little bit later, to offer any thoughts about what that gives us potentially as a set of observers who care very much about higher education, but who are not taking our peculiar customs for granted? I mean, what do you think were some of the customs that you think, well, Berkeley, for heaven's sake, Berkeley, that's not fair. Berkeley is too weird on its own terms here, but just things that people were doing and you thought, why are they doing that? Or what is it that they're doing? Do you have any back to those entry moments of thinking, why do they carry books in their backpack if they never take the books out of their backpack to read? I mean, that's just what comes to my mind every now and then. So any thoughts from those early observations?
I think my initial observation was that a lot of students, number one, don't really have a larger goal. They're just going to school. And I saw that in other people because I've been there. So that's one thing I think we need to really figure out as a society, is like, school's really good, but there has to be a larger purpose, not just go to college because go to college. So that, and I don't really know how to fix that, but I think that is something we need to consider.
Right. If you would fix that, I will write your biography. I will put up statues. I'll do whatever you'd like of that. If you could fix that. Nisa, can you fix that? Can you fix the people who are in college and they don't quite have a sense of what the reason is for that? Why don't we just fix that in the next minute or two here, huh?
Well, I couldn't say I know how to fix that, but kind of what Reed was saying, I'm going to kind of touch off of what he was saying there. But I mean, even in the military, we kind of have that same mentality when we're younger and we're following that, older, Marine or sailor, whomever that is, we're kind of look up to them, or, we maybe want to emulate or be like someone. And in a way, we kind of have that same thing. We're like, wait, why are we doing this? Why are we all playing follow the leader? But in our case, it's a little bit different because of the structure and because of how we have to be very uniformed with each other. But, initially, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't observe it too much when I first started at CU, because I was more goal driven on myself and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to get ahead. Of course, there was many of the students who I was like, what are you doing? Like, why not just do it this way instead of doing it that way? But, you have to kind of forgive them, because there's a lot of things that play a role in why, their cognitive development isn't there just yet, or their environment that they've been around. They just may not understand how to do those types of things, and they haven't been challenged yet as a person to really know how to ask for that type of help or what direction to go into. So, I mean, maybe we should have classes that can teach that, Patty. Maybe we should have like a course that instead of you learning what to think, you learn how to think, right?
Yeah. And I guess I'm just thinking that there's really something very promising there, but it may be. Well, I want to go back to stories about being in the service, but I just want to ask if you. Okay, I have seen in one of my classes, I saw one of the CU student veterans take 3 or 4 not so motivated students with whom he was going to be in a small group doing a group project, and he took lessons of leadership from his full life. And he brought these other students into much more, much higher level of achievement. And in essence, I guess what I'm saying is, how would you, is it, you have enough to do, but but being sort of the undercover teaching assistants, or the people saying to the not so clearly motivated and organized people. I mean, I don't see any reason to say, oh, you should do that besides getting your own education, but you're in an unusual position to work. I don't want to say undercover, that's not quite the right word, but just being among them and saying, well, actually, this is might be a different way of sitting in class and taking notes, or I don't know. Is that, tell me what you think about this idea, and if it's not the right idea, I'm not going to be surprised. What do you think? I'll let you go first, Nisa, and then we'll go to Reed.
I was gonna let Reed go.
Oh, okay, well, it's a terrible question. So,
because he looked like he had his idea going for him. Go ahead, Reed.
Oh, okay. Well, Reed, it looks like
okay.
You get that one.
So I think this kind of relates back to that previous problem. I think a lot of people, they're just in school, so they don't necessarily have the they just know we have to do these assignments or whatever, but they don't necessarily see the value in that. So I think explaining or describing or discussing why something is actually useful beyond like, to do this math problem so you know how to do this thing. It's more, here's how to think about a new thing in a new way, or some like explaining the larger purpose of it, as well as just really just having someone to talk to can be really motivating. So if like the gentleman you talked to, just by recognizing someone and saying, hey, I see you're having an issue with this, let me help, that can be enormously motivating for someone to actually try to start. Because then if they have a little bit of help, if they do run into problems, and then they can see a helpful path forward.
Right. Okay. So now let's go back to being in the search. So I had, until I was anticipating this event, I hadn't really thought through man, you get plunked in with a bunch of strangers, and yet you were all going to be in relationship to each other and part of a larger whole, and possibly really depending on each other for life and death situations. So how does that work? Do you play icebreakers and party games to get to know each other? And I think I know the answer to that, but how does the military take a bunch of people who have never seen each other, much less developed habits or familiarity? How does that work? How do you get from, I am here with a bunch of strangers, to we're part of a larger group and I know many of these individuals? How does that happen? And I know it's something that would just be happening, but if you could just tell those of us who have never had that experience, what is that like and how does it work?
All right, I'll definitely chime in on this one. So in my opinion, it starts in boot camp, literally. I mean, because you're already put in there with many strangers who you all know that, you're supposed to be here, but some of you may not know exactly why you're here or what you just got yourself into. But, I found that, and like I said, being an athlete, I already had an understanding of how to work with a group to, achieve a certain goal. But in boot camp, it's a whole different structure. And from there, you are literally on the same schedule as these other individuals. Like, you're going through all the tough times every single time. You're all exhausted. You're all, completely overworked. You've been yelled at. You've been screamed at. I mean, everything, everything above the sun. So that's probably one of the biggest ways you get to know each other. And then, and Reed, let me know if this happened for you. I'm sure it happened in the Navy, but moving from boot camp and then, you go to your job school, then you go to the fleet. That's where we operate. You continue to tell the stories. You continue to tell the stories from boot camp, from your schools, and then moving forward, and you connect with more people through that storytelling. Or maybe you're from the same place as them, or there's certain interests that just kind of collect you all together because you're going through the same crap together. So that's probably the best way I could describe it. But I'm sure Reed, you probably have some other things to say as well.
That was really interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think much along the same lines, just cramming people together and forcing them to go through really tough experiences, it just causes people to bond. Like people that I knew in my prototype class, which was like our last phase of training, that went to the ship with me, we were automatically friends because it's like the only people you know on the ship, like these 3 other people. So that's like your initial core group of friends, because you do have those shared experiences. But then, you spend time with the same people day in, day out for years. Like we had our watch teams, it was the same 5 people on the same rotation, and you're constantly interacting. So now they're some of my best friends.
Yeah.
Just because you work with them, you deal with, you go through the same crap together, you
Oh.
you share so much there, and it allows you to see what you have in common.
Well, I love those answers. And I just would love if we could install in more people's minds that when you were going through the same crap, you were getting an excellent opportunity to fill relationship and ties instead of what is, I think, a common human thing. Oh no, crap. Oh no, we have to go through it. But to think it's a good moment. We're on our way here. I just found that incredibly interesting as a hope for society, I guess, that you don't have to do that. I've already asked you to save all the students from a lack of motivation, who not many students do not have a lack of motivation, but I've already asked you to save the ones who don't. But I'm not going to ask you to save society. That's good. Huh? But I really think you've given us just a wonderful sense. And also, Nisa, when you said it's the storytelling, that you are telling each other stories, and that's part of the bonding, I think. That's really, really promising. There's a lot of hope in that. So thank you. That was really great. I do want to make sure we have some good questions, and I want to make sure I get those in. So I want to shift over to that for a moment here. But I feel like I would. Okay, so that was totally good. When you, well, in fact, maybe I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this transition. Are there clear patterns where you can say to yourself, because of my military service, things that are very hard for some people in college are actually just, I'm not going to call it the same old crap, but it's something that you can just say, okay, been there and done that, or been there and done something like that. So just the skills and how they transfer into higher education, just a little bit on that, of where you can just say, well, that actually really different framework, really different arena, but it's working for me. What I picked up in this other place is now working here. So some stories about that.
So I think the first thing that a lot of people that I didn't have that helped me grow in the military was self-discipline. Just the fact that you have to do this stuff on your own. So you just do, because you can't not do it. And then you carry that forward. And then just the attitude of, again, like having a vision and like larger goals and personal connections, understanding how important that is. So now when you interact with people, you can see it's not just, I'm just talking to people. It's like you're building a network and friendships. That's really important. And then for me particularly, a lot of the skills I learned in the nuclear program have been directly applicable, like the engineering and industrial aspects. So just some of my classes, that has been super helpful.
Interesting. Yeah. Nisa, do you want to do that one?
Sure. Well, like Reed, for my MOS in aviation, it was very demanding, very 24/7, working around the clock constantly, and having organization, understanding locations, how to read certain transcripts, maps, all that stuff. So with that kind of organization, the level that I was working at, and the level of individuals that I was working with, that definitely carried me over into college, of just knowing how to be, all right, let's be time efficient, organized, structured, all those things. But where I lacked was trying to always do it by myself. And the reason I lacked there is, I'm going to take you just a little bit further back, but from boot camp moving forward, the goal is to break you as an individual and build you back up into a more solidified group of people, and understand that you can't just always do it by yourself. Like, you really just can't, legitimately. And for that experience for me was when I just came to work with the VMA, and Stuart Elliott, our director at the VMA, he brought me on board, hopefully because he saw something in me. But no, he really helped me through that time frame of when I was transitioning and I was getting out, and I was really lost. I wasn't finding any camaraderie with people, and I wasn't trying to, because in a way I thought, oh, they don't understand me. But really what saved me was honestly working at the VMA, getting to know people like Reed and the other veterans that I work with, understanding how they have operated in college, what they do, and seeing how much they do not have that fear of actually asking for help. So
Right, that's really good.
Yeah,
Yeah, and those who are with us, who made it VMA, Veteran Military Affairs Office on campus, which is really a great bright place on our campus. Because I was about to ask if being around people so much, and then there are plenty of people on campus, but they're all just milling around and going in different directions, that it might just feel lonely to be where you had been in such constant company with people. And then it would be like coming from a very large family and going to a college and just thinking, where are my brothers, where are my sisters? I don't know, it's very striking to see how that contrast exists. So I'm going to bring in a couple of the questions we have here. So we have, I think this one is something that we would really just want to keep in mind and maybe return to it. And from Taylor Hannock, as a viewer, he has a question for the interviewer and interviews. With this interview, what impacts do you want to leave on the viewers as veterans? So I think we'll just keep that hanging and come back to that just as we're finishing, because that's a really good question. And Taylor is asking you, Nisa, with integrated physiology being one of your majors, also being a veteran, what impact do you want to leave on those you encounter, and why particularly integrated physiology is the route for that? What would help you leave even more of that impact?
Oh, okay. I wasn't prepared for that one.
No.
You know, so a funny thing, thank you, Taylor, for asking. So it's a funny thing, I actually started as an anthropology major, but it wasn't until my injury after rugby that made me move to double major with integrative physiology, because I found out that my real passion in life and what I really want to do is more geared towards actual, sports medicine, understanding the human body, understanding biomechanics, kinesiology, and the science of it. Like have always been fascinated by it since I was a child. And, by utilizing that major and being able to explore it to its, full capabilities, I hope moving forward, I hope to actually become a physical therapist and athletic trainer with that. And with that, I hope to leave that impact and to leave that, that motivation to someone who either has gone through an injury or is an athlete, or even if they're not, let them understand that how important it really is to take care of your body, and how taking care of that also takes care of your mind. It takes care of your spirit. It allows you to emit energy around you that is more positive for those to be around. And me personally, I learned so much through that injury. I think that was the first time I actually cried in a couple of years, was when I was healing back from it. And not just the physical pain, but it was the mental pain. It was actually telling myself that I really can't do this right now. I legitimately cannot walk. I legitimately cannot squat. I can't do this, like, physically, but what can I do right now? So I did the things I could do. I surrounded myself with those people who wanted to help me. I surrounded myself with people from the VMA, with, other trainers and people who understood how to work through those things mentally and physically. And, I hope that if I can leave one impact on someone, is that to never doubt yourself mentally or physically.
That was a good answer. And Taylor has asked you a career-oriented question as well, Reed, that you are in an education that would involve public policy. And so what is your purpose in getting a background with public policy, and what is the impact that you would hope to have to leave on the senator that is viewing this interview? Do we have a senator who is viewing this interview? Is that, or the senator of the future who will be? Well, anyway, let's have a senator I'm not sure. Senators, whoever you are, we're really glad that you're here, and maybe we'll find out later who you are, and we'll be grateful for your public service as well. So, okay, so what is the with your major, economics, energy issues, all that, where is that going to engage with the world the way that Nisa just walked us through how her interest will do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the ship, the last 2 years I was there, my main job was to manage the electrical distribution for the entire ship. So what that taught me effectively was how critical energy is to the function of our society. Because like for the ship, obviously, if you don't have electricity, you can't fire your missiles, you can't launch your planes, you can't run pumps for whatever purposes. So the same thing applies to our nation. We are entirely dependent on electricity and becoming more and more so. So focusing on energy policy, I applied to graduate school at Colorado School of Mines. I haven't heard back yet, but I'm hoping to get in there for the Advanced Energy Systems or Mineral Energy Economics program. But my main larger purpose is I want to apply the same principles that we used on the ship. The fact that energy is a critical need for everything, for the entire mission, and apply that to the nation. We need to redesign our energy grid because it was designed for fossil fuels, and it worked for a long time, but with the needs of renewable energy, we have to rethink how we do it. As we saw in Texas, that's just the beginning if we don't take care of things. And so I want to fix that. That's my larger goal. And if the senator would like to talk to me, I will happily discuss.
Yeah, yes, Senator, we need you in this conversation, Senator. So I wanted to say, because this takes off a little bit from something I mentioned to both of you before, that Reed, when you are taking your experience on a ship as not just an analogy, but as almost an equivalence of us on a planet. This is how we're a nation, but we're also on a planet, that you are taking your time on a ship and saying, this is a very direct route to thinking about how we live on the planet. And so I wanted to ask both of you, because you have, if you would say a bit about where you have traveled and what you've seen, and just that speculative, am I right in thinking that you are more aware of being residents of a planet than those of us who just, in my case, just circle around the American West most of the time? And actually, don't even go around the American West with the pandemic. But anyway, since you have been on so many places on the planet, does that allow you to make that sense of how the whole thing is functioning and where you are in that whole planetary framework? To have been in, just feel free just to tell us places where you have been and how your geographic experience involves so many different places. But what does that do to your mind and your sense of who you are as a human being on a planet? Nisa, do you want to go first?
Sure, I was just waiting to see who you'd like to go first. So I've been to Okinawa, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, and Thailand, so mainly on the Pacific. And from there, it honestly, it made me even more grateful to be able to come home. Even being when I was in the Marine Corps, and dealing with maybe like a really old barracks or any of those things that we deal with on our day-to-day basis that we want to complain about. It is in no way comparison to those individuals who live in those countries, especially third world countries, and seeing how they live, and whether it's completely outside or they live away from their families. Their rules and regulations are a lot different than ours, and a lot less decisions that they're allowed to make for themselves. So that really put me in a position where I was like, wow, like I'm sitting here complaining about eating an MRE and that, but here is, this 4 or 5 year old child trying to sell me something because they're literally just trying to make ends meet. They're trying to do something and contribute to their family in some sort of way. And they're living in nothing with, barely any clothing, no shoes, no anything. So, I would say that it really did make me realize more about our planet and how others live, and to honestly always be grateful of those things. Even now with COVID, being grateful for what you have and where you're at, not what you don't have. So
Right.
I would say that was definitely it for me.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Great.
So I went to the Persian Gulf primarily. So en route, we went to Greece, stopped in Bahrain, Dubai, and on the way back, we stopped in Crete. So I saw primarily Med and Middle East tours. I thought it was really interesting to see, like Nisa said, just seeing how other people live, the things we take for granted. We, it was a good perspective change on that. And then just seeing the impact that we had. So many people around the world were really happy to see us, but so many people were not. And so it makes, really makes you think like we have, we have a big responsibility, basically, is really the thing that I learned from that. We're all a global community. We are from our nations, but we kind of have a responsibility for each other.
That is really well put. Then one question from the audience that seems like this would be helpful to have on record here. What would you both tell someone who may be on the fence about joining the military after college? How do you prepare, what to expect, what not to expect, what life is like while on active duty, and so on. So advice to someone who might be thinking of going in a different order there from college. I mean, you really are the people who have a visa when it comes from moving from the military to higher education. And so this is an interesting, if someone's going to go the other direction, what should that traveler have in mind?
I would say it depends on what your goals are. There's a lot of really good things you can do, valuable experiences you can have. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be it can be worth it. I would try to talk to someone if in closer to the specific field, because it does vary. But in the Navy, if you're on a ship, you go on deployments however often, and then you have a lot of underway time or duty time where you are basically stuck on the ship for 24 hours and you have to take care of whatever you're responsible of. So you have to take that into mind. So family matters are a concern. But if you want to experience the world and experience something new and take a new path that can take you wherever you want to go, it can be very good for you.
Yeah. Nisa, do you want to take that?
Sure. I definitely have to agree with Reed. It really depends on what your goals are and, where your mindset is at after college, because that could easily change depending on what route you want to go. It also depends the branch, the actual job you're really seeking, and if you want that job to also carry over into the civilian world. And on top of that, if you wanted to go in as a commissioned officer versus someone who's enlisted. And it's a lot easier in terms of, going from college to the officer side, because that's generally the way that they have to do it anyways. But it really just depends on what you're seeking, what job you actually want, and if you're mentally prepared to put yourself through 4 years or more of another challenge that, college has already challenged you with. So yeah, I would have to agree with Reed on that one.
Okay, so we are at the moment where I get to say to you, what is the stories that you haven't told that when we run out of time, which is 6 minutes away, if you don't tell that story, you're going to think, oh, shoot, I really wanted to tell that story. So here's what is that story that when we hit the finish line and your audience hasn't had the privilege and pleasure of hearing that story, we don't even know what we missed, but you're thinking, oh, shoot, I should have told them that story. So let's have a round of that. Whoever is most
Reed, do
compelled.
you know your story or do you want me to go? Okay. I was thinking of mine. Okay. This is maybe not necessarily a story, but it does circulate around the one I told in the beginning with everything in infantry. I guess what I'd have to say is, after graduating from that and, moving forward into the fleet, I actually received a lot less appreciation from it. I didn't really receive the I mean, not that I was really expecting people to welcome me with open arms or know who I was or say, oh, you're amazing, you're this, you're, you're whatever the case is. But I actually just received a lot less, I guess, praise from it. And I actually had a lot of Marines, especially females, who really weren't, or who either seemed a little bit jealous or maybe bitter or whatever the case was. And, for a long time, I actually didn't tell that story. I did not like telling that story about myself because I get received so much, I guess you could say a lot of more hate from other people versus, being like, wow, like you really did that. That's amazing. So, I guess the message I could just leave everyone here with is, don't let those individuals in any way who either want to pick at you or say those things about you or whatever, remember, they can't take that away from you because you earned it. You got it. Right. You did it on your own, no matter what anyone says. That's yours forever. And you get to tell that story moving forward. And, most likely those who are still the naysayers, they're going to come and go anyways. So I think that was my important part of my story, was to actually tell it.
I think that's great. And the Australians have that phrase, the tall poppy, that the other, I don't know how a poppy is going to cut down another poppy, but if there is a tall poppy who was risen over that will create some significant, let's get that down to size. And so that's a great sort of, well, no, as a tall poppy, if I could use that phrase. I don't know why I'm going so Australian on this one, but you have to say, sorry, I am this, and this is what I've done. So I think that's really great. So Reed, a story.
So the one that comes to mind, I flew home from a training school, and I was almost decertified or missing my time horizon for a qualification. So I needed to stand as watch, but they were doing a maintenance, 7-year maintenance where they're testing pressure relief valves. And I had to stand in the watch that was doing the testing. So they basically said, here's this procedure, go, study it, and we're going to run through it, and then you're going to go do this testing. So I had the luxury of doing this incredible test where we'd raise reactor pressure so that it would test the valves. And it was really interesting. But the most important part about that was that I understood at that moment, I began to understand how important long-term thinking is, because this entire system that we were operating was designed in the 50s and 60s, but it worked incredibly well and will for another 50, 60 years. And there were many examples of that where I started to see how a well thought out plan, long thinking more than, the next election or the next week can really do well for us as a society. So I think one of my major takeaways from that was we need to start thinking longer term.
That's really great. And I will say a historian is going to be really pleased by that, because there are different ways of living in time. And one of them is the short-sighted, let's just throw it together and then we'll be gone. But to think of the people after us and to think in units of time of 50, 100 years, that is really the key. If historians can team up with you on that, we want your coattails on that one. We want to be in your slipstream. So I have learned the phrase quiet professional, which I knew the word quiet and I knew the word professional, but I had never heard those two words brought together. And now, having been in the company of student veterans, I now have that in my vocabulary. And quiet professional, you do your work and you're not stopping to tell us how well you're doing your work. You're just doing your work. And so I understand now that my speaker series, which we have just had, we just had our first run at, that kind of goes a little bit in opposition to the quiet professional, and that the just come tell us about what you have done is not entirely tell each other stories. Yes, that is part of your world, but to then come tell us, that's going a little bit against the quiet professional. And so I really value the fact that you have taken this invitation and come here and told us about your life. And I'm now going to read from my own writing here, which is insufferable, but it's so perfect. So that the focus will be of these programs, this is the description of these programs, the focus will be on the stories and reflections of young people who are unmistakably wise beyond their years, and also students with intense curiosity and compelling ambitions for the future. And if I have ever written anything that proved to be true, this is my moment, because the wisdom unmistakably wise beyond their years and with intense curiosity and compelling ambitions for the future, I am going to have a new career as a prophet, because I just totally called this one. And I just am driven mad when I cannot do standing ovations, which is what this, I like Zoom, I'm okay with Zoom, but if I stood up for a standing ovation, it would just be a peculiar view of the rest of my jacket, which isn't going to be very meaningful. So ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, if you would just join me in hearty applause for these two great souls, Nisa Jovel and Reed Robins. And we'll be back next Friday at noon with two other wise beyond their years and driven with ambition student veterans. And always in these situations, I do want to thank my comrades, my pals, Stu Elliott and Christina Speth at the Veteran and Military Affairs Office, because they really brightened this campus in all kinds of ways. So thank you, everybody. See you soon.